It started as the trip of a lifetime. My friends had been talking about this remote island in Southeast Asia for years. Paradise, they called it, a hidden gem untouched by tourism. After months of grueling work and little sleep, I decided I deserved it. A week in a place where time seemed to stand still. Sign me up. I arrived on a Monday. The island was everything they described: white sand beaches, crystalline waters, and thick jungles alive with the hum of nature. The locals were friendly, albeit reserved. They spoke of the island's history with a mix of pride and fear, but their stories were vague, riddled with half-answers and nervous glances. "Stay out of the jungle after dark," one old man warned me at the market. His cloudy eyes seemed to pierce through me. I laughed it off, assuming it was a tale to keep tourists from getting lost. The first few days were bliss. I hiked, swam, and feasted on fresh seafood. But by the fourth night, something felt off. It started with a dream. I was walking through the jungle, the moonlight barely piercing the dense canopy. The air was thick, oppressive, and I could hear whispers, soft, urgent, and incomprehensible. When I turned around, there was a figure standing in the shadows. Its face was obscured, but its eyes, those eyes burned like embers. I woke up drenched in sweat, my heart racing. The next day, I decided to shake off the lingering unease by exploring a hidden beach a local had told me about. The path was rough, overgrown, and the deeper I went, the more I felt like I was being watched. I told myself it was my imagination, a byproduct of the dream. When I finally emerged from the jungle, the view was breathtaking. But the beauty of the place was marred by an unsettling discovery. Footprints. They were scattered across the sand, leading to and from the water. They were too large to be human, yet too defined to belong to any animal I knew. I decided to head back, but the path seemed different. The trees twisted unnaturally, their branches clawing at the sky. The jungle's hum grew louder, almost deafening. I quickened my pace, heart pounding, until I stumbled back onto the main road. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. That night, the dream returned. This time, the whispers were louder, and the figure was closer. Its face began to emerge from the shadows, but I woke before I could see it clearly. By now, I was uneasy, but too stubborn to let fear ruin my trip. On the sixth night, a storm rolled in. The wind howled and rain lashed against the windows of my bungalow. I lay in bed trying to convince myself that the tapping on the glass was just a loose branch. Then I heard it, a low, guttural growl, followed by the sound of something heavy moving outside. Summoning courage, I grabbed a flashlight and stepped onto the porch. The jungle loomed just beyond the clearing. The beam of light caught movement, a fleeting shadow that sent my stomach into free fall. I called out, half expecting to hear laughter, maybe from a prankster, but the only response was silence. And then, the whispers. Faint at first, they grew louder, coming from all directions. They weren't in any language I recognized, yet they chilled me to the bone. I backed into the bungalow, bolting the door and windows. Sleep was impossible. By dawn, the whispers had stopped, but the unease lingered. I decided to leave the island early. Paradise or not, something was very wrong here. At the ferry terminal, the locals avoided my gaze. Only the old man from the market approached me. He placed a hand on my shoulder and said, "You've seen it, haven't you?" "Seen what?" I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted the answer. "The Watcher," he said. "It's been here long before us. It doesn't like outsiders. If you're lucky, it will let you go." The ferry ride was tense. The waves were choppier than usual, and I couldn't shake the feeling of being followed. When the island finally disappeared from view, I thought I'd feel relief. But that night, in my hotel on the mainland, the dream returned one final time. This time, the figure wasn't obscured. Its face was a grotesque mask of decayed flesh and sharp, inhuman features. It leaned in close, its ember eyes boring into mine, and whispered, "You cannot leave." I woke to find scratches on my arms and sand in my bed. I haven't slept properly since. Every time I close my eyes, I see those burning eyes and I hear the whispers. I left the island, but I'm not sure it let me go. Every time someone asks me why I never travel anymore, I tell them the same story, the one I swore I'd never tell again. But some things just don't let you go. And maybe, just maybe, sharing it one more time will ease the grip it has on me. It started innocently enough, a solo trip to a remote part of Norway. I'd been fascinated by the idea of solitude, of disappearing into nature and feeling the world's pulse in a way city life never allowed. A tiny cabin nestled deep in the fjords seemed perfect. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, just me, the mountains, and the endless northern skies. The cabin was owned by a man named Anders, a gruff but kind older local, who met me at the nearest town to hand over the keys. "You're sure about this?" he asked, his eyes narrowing beneath a weathered brow. "It's beautiful out there, but people forget how quiet it gets. Too quiet sometimes." I laughed it off. "That's exactly what I'm looking for," I said. The drive to the cabin was breathtaking. Towering cliffs, waterfalls cascading like liquid glass, and the kind of silence that feels almost sacred. When I finally arrived, the cabin was everything I'd hoped for. Small but cozy, with large windows overlooking a glacial lake. A single dock jutted into the water, and the reflection of the surrounding peaks was so perfect, it felt like stepping into a dream. The first 2 days were blissful. I hiked during the day, cooked simple meals on the wood stove, and spent hours sitting on the dock, letting the cold air bite at my cheeks. At night, the stars spread across the sky like a story being whispered just out of reach. I'd never felt so alive, so alone, and so content. But then the noises started. The first time I heard it, I was in bed. A faint scratching, like fingernails on wood, coming from the direction of the dock. I sat up, heart pounding, and strained to listen. It stopped. Telling myself it was probably just a branch or an animal, I forced myself back to sleep. The next night it came again, louder this time. Scratch, 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 always 3 times, then silence. I got out of bed, grabbed the flashlight Anders had left, and stepped outside. The air was frigid, and the world was deathly still. I pointed the beam toward the dock. Nothing. Just the water lapping gently against the wood. I stayed awake the rest of the night, my mind racing with rational explanations. By the 3rd night, I wasn't so sure. I'd just settled into bed when the sound came again, but this time it wasn't just scratching. There was a low, guttural moan, so faint I wasn't sure if I'd imagined it. My body went cold, and every instinct screamed at me to stay inside, to lock the door and pretend I hadn't heard it. But curiosity, or maybe something darker, drove me to look. I crept to the window and peeked out. At first I saw nothing but the dock and the endless black of the lake. Then I saw it. A figure, barely visible, standing at the edge of the dock. It was tall, impossibly tall, and its head, or what I thought was its head, tilted as if it were listening. The moan came again, louder this time, and the figure moved, its limbs bending at unnatural angles. I stumbled back from the window, my breath coming in short, panicked gasps. My rational mind tried to convince me it was a trick of the light, a shadow, anything but what I thought I'd seen. But deep down, I knew. I'd never been so certain of anything in my life. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat in the corner of the cabin, clutching the flashlight and a kitchen knife. Every creak, every gust of wind set my nerves on edge. When dawn finally broke, I packed my things and prepared to leave. Anders could keep the deposit. I didn't care. I just needed to get out. As I loaded my bag into the car, I glanced toward the dock one last time. The figure was gone, but something else caught my eye. Carved into the wood, deep and deliberate, were 3 long scratches. I drove to the nearest town and tried to call Anders, but the call wouldn't go through. When I finally found someone who knew him, their face went pale. "Anders died last year," they said. "Heart attack right in that cabin." I left that day and never looked back. But sometimes in the dead of night, I hear it again. Scratch, scratch, scratch. Always 3 times. And I wonder if it followed me home. I've always been the type of guy who thrives on adventure. Exotic destinations, remote trails, the thrill of the unknown. That's what keeps my blood pumping. So when my best friend Dylan suggested we take a trip to a secluded island off the coast of Thailand, I was all in. A week of untouched beaches, turquoise waters, and no tourists sounded like paradise. The island, Koh Sorn, wasn't even on the map. Dylan had heard about it through some backpacker forum. A hidden gem, they said, accessible only by hiring a local fisherman to take you there. No resorts, no Wi-Fi, no distractions, just nature. It was exactly what we were looking for. We arrived at the mainland village late in the afternoon, hired a wiry old fisherman named Somchai, and set off in his creaky wooden boat. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in fiery reds and oranges, Koh Sorn came into view. It was breathtaking, a silhouette of jagged cliffs, dense jungle, and a crescent of white sand. Somchai, however, didn't share our enthusiasm. "Stay close to the shore," he warned in broken English as we unloaded our gear, "and leave before dark." We laughed it off, chalking it up to local superstition. The island had an eerie beauty to it, sure, but it didn't feel dangerous. Not then. Our first couple of days were incredible. We explored hidden coves, swam in crystal-clear lagoons, and camped under a sky so full of stars it felt like a dream. The island was ours, and ours alone. But by the third night, things started to feel off. It began with the noises, strange guttural sounds echoing through the jungle. At first I thought it was just the wind or maybe some nocturnal animals. But as the hours passed, the sounds grew louder, more distinct. It almost sounded like whispers. Dylan shrugged it off. "Probably just monkeys," he said, though his eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. "Let's get some sleep." I tried, but sleep didn't come easy. The whispers seemed to move closer, circling our campsite. At one point, I swore I heard my name. The next morning, we decided to explore the jungle. We figured maybe the isolation was getting to us, that we just needed to distract ourselves. The trail we followed was overgrown, but it led us to an unexpected discovery, an abandoned village. The huts were ancient, their bamboo walls caved in, roofs consumed by vines. In the center of the village stood a massive stone idol, weathered and moss-covered. It was grotesque, its features distorted, its eyes seeming to follow us no matter where we moved. Dylan joked about taking a selfie with it, but something about the place made my skin crawl. We didn't stay long. That night, the whispers returned, louder than ever. This time, they were accompanied by footsteps, soft, shuffling, just beyond the edge of our firelight. Dylan grabbed a flashlight and shone it into the darkness, but there was nothing there, or so we thought. The next morning we found footprints in the sand, barefoot, human footprints, circling our tent, but they weren't ours. "Someone's messing with us," Dylan said, his voice tight. "Maybe Somchai's trying to scare us into leaving." I wasn't so sure. The footprints didn't lead back to the jungle. They just stopped. We decided to pack up and head back to the mainland. Whatever was happening, we didn't want to stick around to find out. But when we reached the beach, Somchai's boat was gone. Panic set in. We had no way to contact anyone, no way to leave. Dylan suggested we signal for help by lighting a massive bonfire. As we gathered driftwood, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. Every rustle in the trees, every shadow, felt alive. That night, the whispers turned into voices. Clear, guttural, speaking a language I couldn't understand. And then we saw them. Figures emerged from the jungle, their bodies painted in ash and blood, their eyes glinting in the firelight. They moved silently, surrounding us. One of them stepped forward, holding something in their hands. It was a crude effigy, bound in vines, with a lock of my hair tied around its neck. I don't remember much after that. Just chaos. Dylan screaming, hands grabbing me, the world spinning. I woke up at dawn, alone on the beach. The fire was out, our campsite destroyed. Dylan was gone. I searched the island for hours, calling his name until my voice gave out. There was no sign of him. Somchai's boat returned that afternoon. He didn't ask what happened, and I didn't tell him. I just wanted to leave. It's been 6 months. I've told people Dylan got lost, that I couldn't find him. But every night I dream of the island, of the whispers, of those eyes in the dark. And sometimes, when I'm alone, I hear my name.